Live there in just a moment. And going record here. And we're letting Gail Redden in as we speak. Perfect timing, Gail. I want to give just a moment for Gail. There we go. Okay. So, welcome again. We are now recording both to eventually to appear on YouTube, and we are on Facebook Live. And I'm going to try to kind of slip over to Facebook Live from time to time to see if there's anybody's asking questions there. We haven't done that before, so I don't know whether it will work or not, but we will give it a shot. And we want to kind of give you a sense of the flow of the evening. We will be welcoming everybody as they come on. We may not be able to, once we get started, to do it right when you come on, but as I see other people come on, I want to let them know that, you know, we're really welcoming them to be here, like with the readings there. Great to have you here. And now Nancy Walker's coming on there. And we're going to start off the evening with a few questions. Benny and I are going to ask Janelle about her writing, kind of pick her brains a little bit. And then we're going to have the reading that Benny will be doing. And then there will also be time at the end for other questions from our participants. Now, if you're a little shy about asking a question, that's not a problem. There is a chat function in here. So depending on how you're accessing this Zoom call tonight, put down at the bottom, there should be a little button called chat. And there you can ask a question. And I've got my chat here, so I'll be checking that periodically. And either Benny or myself will ask the question for you. And don't feel like you have to do it that way. Just, again, some people are a little bashful sometimes about asking the question, and I'm not bashful about anything these days, so I have no problem asking them. Okay, so again, welcome, Janelle, to our first ever read up for guest authors. And I want to thank you so much for being one of our early adopters. I like using that term instead of guinea pig, although it means about the same. And thank you for being here. And just want to welcome you here first off.
Well, thanks for having me.
So, Janelle, why don't you start by introducing yourself, where you're from, and how you got into writing, and maybe a little bit about King's Warrior that we're going to be reading from today, and we'll go from there.
All right. I'm originally from the western Chicago suburbs in Illinois, and I grew up there. And now I'm in Wisconsin. And I love it here. We spent about 9 years in exile. We call it our exile years in North Carolina, where we didn't get any snow, and we're weird. We like snow. So we're very happy to be in Wisconsin now. I kind of always been telling stories. I grew up listening to my dad read stories out loud, and my cousins and I would tell each other stories and make up stories. And then I guess my dad thought I was kind of good at it, because in college I came home and I had a job lined up, and I was going to be a teacher. I was going to college to be a teacher, but my job was not teaching at that point. I was only a freshman. And he said, if you want to be a writer, you should be writing. And I was like, oh, I didn't know I wanted to be a writer. But he then he kind of sweetened the pot a little bit for me and said, I'll pay you $1 per page. I want 10 pages a day. And if you finish it before you go back to college, I'll give you $1,000 extra. And I think he meant, that he'd just send me back to college and I didn't have to pay for it, which was lovely. But hey, my parents are here. So I started writing a story for him to read out loud each night to my sibling.
Oops, we got a little freeze there, it seems like.
We lost you.
That's all right. We're just least we caught her in a beautiful smile. So we'll see if she comes back here in just a moment.
I can tell what I know of it from there. So she wrote this is the story she wrote. It was originally entitled The Dragon's Eye. And oh, no, we may have lost her all the way. But anyway, and oh, here she comes. She's back. Okay. Are you back, Janelle?
I'm not sure what happened. Where did I lose you?
You froze up.
Zoom gremlins.
Right.
All right. Where was I? Can somebody tell me what you did here?
You were telling us about your dad and him reading every night, and then his bribing you to write King's Warrior.
Yeah. So that summer I wrote furiously, and every night my family would listen to him read it out loud. And I had a 9-year-old sister, 13 and 15-year-old brothers, and then my parents that I had to keep entertained. So it's very much for families who like to read out loud together is kind of my target audience always. So,
which is one of the reasons we wanted to have her on here, because this whole read-up idea came from our own vision or mission, you could say. We really want to do whatever we can, particularly during this pandemic, but even after that, to inspire young people to become joyful, lifelong readers by introducing them to the joy of reading for pleasure itself. So it's perfect, that Janelle, that's, there's an alignment, with what our market is and our audience and our intention itself.
Mm-hmm.
So Janelle, what writers influenced you most, would you say?
I mean, Lewis and Tolkien were definitely some of the very first fantasy forays that I went on. I write fantasy, epic fantasy. Lloyd Alexander, Stephen Lawhead, Timothy Zahn are some of the ones that I keep going back to. I think the first fantasy I read on my own was The Deathgate Cycle by Margaret Weiss and Tracy Hickman, and then I was pretty much hooked forever. So
I'm gonna have to look up some of those.
I've got recommendations. I've got a whole page on my website, just recommended reads. So
I've looked at some of those. So
something.
why don't you tell us your website, and we can put it in the chat or something if people want to look at it.
Yeah, it's www.janelleschmidt.com. So it's very easy, except that neither of my names is easy to spell. So it's JENELLESCHMIDT.
Okay. And what are you working on now, and what's in the future for you?
Currently I'm working on a 5-book series that's fantasy gas lamp. So kind of steampunk, but with magic. And steampunk enthusiasts, apparently, if you start putting wizards in, they want you to get your own genre. So so it's gas lamp, but it's about some airship pirates, and there's a wizard and some robots, and kind of a coming of age story for some young men trying to get to the academy and figure out who they are in the world.
Cool. Sounds fun.
I'm excited about it.
Any plans for audio?
Probably. I got to get it all edited first. It's all 5 books are written, but I wrote the first book about 10 years ago and then discovered, and when I went back to it last year to start editing it, that I've learned a lot in 10 years and my writing has improved. And I've worked with a lot of editors in the last 10 years. And so I just have to rewrite it from the ground up, which is a little discouraging, but it'll be better. So,
yeah.
So
that's good, because I was going to ask you, do you have any, as some writers call them, trunk stories that you might bring back at some point? It sounds like that might be one itself that, like I said, may need some work, but the basic storyline still there and very, very valuable itself.
Yeah.
Any others down there in the bottom desk drawer, or in our case these days, probably somewhere hidden away in your computer files?
I have some stories that I wrote in high school, but those are not going to ever see the light of day. I do have a Cinderella retelling that I've been thinking about. I need to polish that up. And then I did just release this past June an Echo of the Fae, which is a fairy tale story, and the main character's on the back. Oh, can you see that? Yeah.
Oh yeah, beautiful.
It's super cute. And that's kind of a middle grade coming of age fairy tale. It loosely inspired by Rapunzel, but not at all based on Rapunzel, because it didn't end up being a Rapunzel retelling, which was what I meant it to be. But
very good. We've got a couple of new people coming on. I just want to let you know. So we're welcoming the growing crowd here, which we love to see itself. And again, if you have questions that you want to ask Janelle, feel free, if you're not comfortable asking them yourself towards the end, to put them in the chat area, and we'll be happy to answer those as we go along.
So Janelle, with fantasy worlds, and especially, you know, your own creation, there are all kinds of names in here that are, some of them are way out there, and some of them are you know, something that you might encounter on our planet. So tell me about Key Smash.
Yeah, so occasionally when I'm naming things, I get frustrated and I just start smashing on the keyboard, and then I look at what has been created to see if I can find anything that is remotely pronounceable. Not sure I always succeed with the pronounceable thing, but yeah, I do have a set of creatures in King's Warrior and the series of the Minstrel Song that are called Sea Auks that I created. And apparently I did a good job, because Benjamin said that he went and like looked them up to try to find out what these mythical creatures were, and he couldn't find any information on Google because they don't exist except in my books. But that was one of those where I just kind of mashed on the keyboard for a while. And
well, and to be fair to you, I did find something on Google. I found a couple of short stories of yours that are in the same universe.
Yes.
Very good. Very good.
Why don't you tell us just a little bit about what King's Warrior is about, and then maybe we can segue into the reading and go from there.
All right. So King's Warrior is a story about a man who used to be the King's Warrior, which was a position that the king had for helping defend the country. And the country that he lives in is being threatened by a foreign kingdom. It's like an, I'm gonna butcher this word because I always say it wrong, archipelago, which is a bunch of little islands that are all kind of close together, but you know, like a little closer than say like the United States and England or whatever. But they're all their own separate kingdoms. And one of those kingdoms is going to invade. And so the king decides to send his daughter to go find this man, partially because, hey, buddy, I got a little buddy.
Yeah, always welcome. Kids are always welcome here. Nice to see you.
But he's trying to kind of send her to a place where she'll be safe. But he also does want her to find Brant, who is the King's Warrior, who was the King's Warrior, to ask for his help. And along the way, they kind of end up in over their heads a little bit, and there are dragons and magic swords and prophecies and all sorts of stuff that they have to deal with.
Okay. Well, without further ado, why don't we launch into the reading here, and I'll begin, and we'll take a couple of breaks in here, and you can sum up what's missing. All right. King's Warrior by Janelle Leanne Schmidt. Prologue. Graelden, king of the dragons, mighty lord of the skies over Eomai, handed the golden sword to the mere man who stood before him. This one thing will I give thee. His voice thundered eerily in the huge cavern, resounding off the walls and shaking the floor. The words sounded strange coming off his tongue, for dragons are not accustomed to speaking with men. The dragon tongue, or Old Crayic, is an old language. It is the language of the sea and the land that existed at the beginning of time and remained unchanged throughout the years, unlike the language of men, which changed and developed countless times and continues to do so. Dragons understand and can speak the language of men, but they scoff at it, for it is a young and uneducated language. Its sounds are not nearly so grand as those of Old Crayic, which has a melody like the waves and rolling on the shores, and the thunder rumbling in the sky, and the earth shaking as it splits. The man knelt down before the great dragon and held the gift in his hands reverently. I thank you for this, at least. The huge, green-scaled dragon gazed at the human before him coolly, but his golden eyes shimmered with something like laughter. Think'st thou, little one, that I care so deeply about the affairs of men? Think'st thou that I would come to thy aid and breathe fire upon thy enemies for thee, vanquishing them? No, in the way of my ancestors before me, I too shall let thee fight thine own battles. The man before him remained silent, as is proper and courteous before the Dragon King. Although a king in his own right, Leanne knew better than to anger a dragon. He sighed, his shoulders hunched and his form bent. His head sank lower and his face crumpled. His people now faced the greatest threat their land had ever seen. The dark sails of Lycaelon had been spotted a few weeks ago, but they had not come in force. Instead, the enemy had crept in quietly and secretly, in small groups, attacking outposts and then fading into the shadows. Fear reigned throughout the countryside, and King Leanne had come to the dragons in desperation. And here King Graelden was refusing to come to his aid. But Eomai is your home too. Will you let it be overrun by these dark warriors? Think'st thou that we mythfolk care which human rules other humans? Should I come running to thee whenever a young dragonling challenges my authority? Leanne blinked. Is that what you think this is? If thou canst not defeat thine enemies, then thou shouldst not be king. Leanne stared at the cave floor, an angry flush rising across his face. He felt like a young boy who has just been reprimanded in front of all his friends for something he did not do. We have our own problems, human, Graelden said, his voice quieter. Leanne looked up in surprise, meeting the great dragon's eyes and seeing there a kinship he had not expected. After a moment, he nodded. This he could understand. He, too, had needed to deal with rebellions and would-be usurpers, and this he read in Graelden's eyes. The Dragon King was not telling him that he would not help, but rather that he could not help. However, Graelden continued, I tell thee this, the Fangblade is no ordinary sword. Its deadly blade was formed from one of my own great teeth, and the handle was created from one of my own silver scales, and in its forging it was imbued with dragon magic. It will serve thee and thy descendants, and it shall neither break nor rust as other swords do. But know this as well. The sword has a will of its own, and it does not grant its holder magic, but only brings out what is deep within him already. An evil man can only do evil with the Fangblade, but a man of noble character and a good heart shalt be able to do mighty works with that sword in his hand. Be careful of whose hands thou dost allow the blade to fall into, once thou art done with it. The man before him rose and seemed a little more satisfied. Graelden laughed, a mighty and terrifying sound coming from between those powerful jaws. Thou wouldst have more from me? He asked.
Thou thinkst to command the king of the dragons. Thou thinkst to ask for yet more on top of this great gift that I have granted thee. He eyed the brave man before him, who neither cowered nor shrank at his words, and a deep respect for this man filled Graelden's dragonish heart as he spoke again. Well then, King Leanne, one more thing shall I grant thee. Perhaps you will scoff at this as well, but I warn you, the word of a dragon is not to be taken lightly. I promise you this, if Eomai is ever in such need again, the dragons will not hesitate to come to thy aid.
And Janelle, do you want to sum up what happens kind of in the first chapter now and go from there?
So, well, I think at the end of the prologue there, Leanne eventually dies. This is all the prologue that Benjamin's been reading, and he asks Selwyn, the wizard, who is his advisor. He says, will we ever need the Fang Blade again? Because otherwise I'm going to destroy it. And Selwyn kind of looks into the mists of the future and says something cryptic about maybe needing it. So then King Leanne asks Selwyn to hide the Fang Blade somewhere and put a protection on it so that only somebody who is a direct descendant of his can grab it and get it out of where it's being held. So then in the first chapter, kind of like I was saying, Kamari is the princess, and her father, King Arnaud, knows that sorry, I'm seeing the chat and it's being distracting. My dad wants you to know that you read it better than he ever did. I can't say anything because I love the way you both read it. Anyway, so King Arnaud tells Kamari that he's going to send her to go find the king's warrior. And he's going to send her with her maid, Darby, the elderly woman who's been taking care of her entire life, and the squire, Arayan. And Kamari's not real pleased about this. She kind of just wants to go off by herself. She's very adventurous. She's been learning how to be a squire, and she kind of thinks that she's been keeping that on the down low, that her parents don't know about it. But her father is well aware. And he just kind of thinks it's kind of funny that she thinks he doesn't know. And so then they're setting out, and Kamari she and Arayan, who is the squire, kind of butt heads from moment one. And she's kind of trying to annoy him, and it's working. She's annoying him rather a lot. So.
Okay, and I guess I'll pick up now.
No, we're supposed to go that way, Arayan yelled in exasperation, pointing south.
The three travelers had been wandering through the woods for a good part of the morning now, and Arayan was fed up with the Princess Kamari and her royal maid. He knew which way they were supposed to go, but Kamari seemed to think that her input had something to do with where they would end up. Arayan was frustrated, cold, wet, tired, and hungry, and he would have sworn that the fool girl wanted them to end up in some kind of danger. "Oh, look, the river," Kamari pointed out coolly. Imagine the nerve of that silly stable boy thinking he knew this forest better than she did. She was convinced that he would not be of any help when bandits attacked them. She had not counted on a spoil-sport squire coming along on her adventure. "And which way do you think we should follow the river, your highness?" Arayan asked through gritted teeth. "That way, of course," Kamari said, pointing upstream, which she knew full well was the wrong direction, back towards the palace, just to annoy him. It worked. "Fine," Arayan exploded. "Have it your way, but when we show up back at the palace, I'm not going to take the blame for getting us lost. I know which way we are supposed to go, and you apparently have no experience in following directions at all. You want to go upriver, then you go upriver." He knew he was sputtering, but he no longer cared. "I, on the other hand, am going to go downriver, through the mountains of dusk, and into the village called Peak's Shadow to find your father's friend, and explain why you are not with me.
But I won't have to explain that, will I? Because you know where you're going. You know your way around, don't you? Of course I knew we had to head downriver, stable boy, Kamari said in a chilly tone. As he began his tirade, Kamari was simply amused, but by the time he finished, she was no longer amused and in no mood to explain that she had been teasing. At that, O'Rayan completely lost any and all grip he had on his loosely controlled frustration. What right did she have to treat him like this? She was only a princess after all, and he was a squire in training to become a defender of her nation. Without people like him, she might have been born a peasant's daughter. The nerve of her referring to him as a stable boy. He dismounted from his chestnut horse and marched over to her. Glaring up at her through the rain that had been pouring down on them all day, he grabbed her arm and yanked her out of the saddle. She let out a startled yelp and started beating on him with her fists. He had to admit the girl could throw a punch. He swung her into his arms and turned as she started yelling and protesting. "Now, young man," Darby started, but stopped when he threw her a withering glare. "I am not going to hurt her. I'm just going to teach her that she can't treat people the way she does and get away with it," he said. He slowly and deliberately carried Kamari to the riverbank and dumped her into the 4 feet of chilly, slow-moving water. He watched until she came up, making sure that she was not hurt. Then he turned and walked back to his horse. Kamari was outraged. She came up sputtering and coughing. How dare he? How dare he? The water was not overly cold, and the rain had already soaked her through, but it was the principle of the thing. Who did he think he was to be throwing the princess of the realm into a muddy river? O'Rayan had returned to the side of the river and was now stretching a hand out to her. She grabbed it and spitefully put all her weight into trying to tug him into the river as well. But O'Rayan had prepared himself for such an antic, and he held firm until he had pulled her out of the river and set her on the firm floor of the forest again. Immediately she turned and slapped him across the face. Or, at least, she tried to. He had been expecting the blow and blocked it, but he was not prepared for her second blow. Her fist connected painfully with his jaw, causing him to blink in surprise. Then he wordlessly handed her the thick, dry blanket he had gone to get out of his saddlebags. Kamari snatched it out of his hands and wrapped it around herself haughtily. "My name is O'Rayan, princess," the squire said firmly. "Not stable boy or squire. It is O'Rayan. And from now on, we are going to follow the directions that your father gave to me. Is that understood?" Kamari glowered at him beneath wet lashes and shivered in the cold rain. "I am the Princess Kamari, O'Rayan, and you have no authority to order me about. However, I am quite willing to trust you with the directions from now on." Mustering any and all dignity she had left, she turned on her heel and marched over to her horse, her head held high. She did not look as though she had been taught a lesson, O'Rayan noted ruefully. She almost managed to look as though it had been her idea to take a swim in the river all along. The look she gave him made him wonder just exactly who had really won that last round. Oh well, at least she used my name, he thought to himself resignedly. Well, Janelle, you want to give us a little bit more sum up there? And anybody who colored the picture, that's the picture of Kamari in the water there that my daughter Eleanor did for us.
What do you want me to
just what happens between this and our next scene here? And
is the next scene the one with Brant?
No,
Oh.
It's O'Rayan rescuing Kamari.
That's right.
Okay.
Trying to remember what happens between then.
Sorry to put you on the spot there.
It's okay. My dad is always laughing at me because he'll like ask me questions about my story and I'll be like, I don't know. And then he laughs and he's like, didn't you write it?
Well, do you want me to sum it up because I remember it pretty good?
How about you sum it up?
There you go.
Okay.
Good.
So anyway, they've had their little bout with each other, and in the meantime, Brant, the king's warrior, he is off in the town of Peak Shadow, which is on the other side of the mountains, but it's getting dark, and so Kamari and Oran and whatever, they've gotten to the Mountains of Dusk, and it's kind of a scary place. And they're getting ready to set up camp. They're setting up camp, and Kamari has gone off to collect firewood ostensibly, and she fell in a hole and has not come back yet. So that's where we are. I'll launch in again here. As Oran started the fire and kept it going, Darby spread out their bedrolls inside their makeshift cave of underbrush. She unpacked their horses, fed them, and blanketed them so they would not feel the cold, especially if it rained later that evening. Oran liked Darby. She reminded him of his mother, someone who worked hard and never complained. She was a woman of few words. The only thing he could not fathom at first was her loyalty to Kamari, but now he was starting to understand it a little bit better. He had set off on this trip believing that Kamari was a spoiled, bratty princess. Now he was starting to see she had a great sense of fun. She was not completely helpless in the wilderness, and though she was exasperating, she had an irrepressible personality that drew him. He was finding that he actually enjoyed their fights, if only because it kept the journey from becoming tedious. He also liked the game of wills that had sprung up between them, though he would never have admitted to it. Suddenly, Darby was at his shoulder. He glanced up at her and noticed the worry on her face. "What is it, Darby?" "The storm is near, and Princess Kamari has not returned," she said anxiously. "Her Highness has been gone for a long time." Oran frowned. How long had he been lost in thought? Had Kamari really been gone so long? One glance at his fire told him that she ought to have been back by now. He gave Darby a reassuring look. "I will find her. Maybe she got lost. I'm sure she isn't in any real danger, and I bet if she is, she could probably talk her way out of it." His humor did bring a smile to Darby's face, so he continued. "Can you watch the fire and make sure it doesn't go out?" Grabbing his sword belt, Oran set out after Kamari. He was an excellent hunter. His mentoring knight had often praised him on his skill at tracking. He was impressed by the lack of trail that Kamari had left, but he was also puzzled by it. He would have to find out where she learned these survival skills. He could read her trail, but it would have been a struggle for many less skilled in the art of tracking. Suddenly, her trail disappeared. Oran was mystified. He thought at first he had somehow missed something, but disregarded that thought. In the twilight, he took note of the surroundings, and then, with his sword, poked at the ground before him. The ground ahead would not support his weight, and there was a depression that he could see in the developing darkness. He looked around and found what he sought. Sheathing his sword, he grabbed a sturdy stick and cautiously lay down on his stomach and inched towards the edge of the depression. He held his stick with both hands under his chin, perpendicular to his body. As he inched forward, the ground under him suddenly gave way. With a yell, he fell, but not far. The hole was too narrow for his makeshift staff, and it was now the only thing that kept him from falling. Holding on to the stick for dear life, Oran called out, "Kamari, are you there?" "Oran?" The reply was a mixture of incredulity and relief. "Kamari, are you all right?" he asked. "Yes, I'm a little shaken up, but I think there are some scrapes on my knee. But other than that, I'm okay," she said. "How did you find me?" "I tracked you," Oran said as he pulled himself up on his staff. As he did so, thanking Crutheor Elkiel that the stick didn't break beneath his weight. With a little effort, he was able to pull himself out of the narrow hole. Then he peered down. "Can you see me, Kamari?" "Yes, I can." "How far down would you say you are?" he asked, holding his breath, hoping it was not too far. 10 or 12 feet. I'm not really sure. If I could climb on my own shoulders, would almost be able to climb out," she said. Oran let his breath out in a sigh of relief and said, "I'm going to lower a stick down to you. Tell me if you can reach it. If you can, then grab hold of it and let me pull you out." "Do you think that will work?" Kamari said. "What if I can't hold on?" "Then we will try again. I will get you out of there."
When he got no reply, he lowered the staff down. "I've got it," Kamari called, as he felt her grab onto the end of it. "All right," she yelled. "Pull me up." It was more difficult to pull her up than he had first thought it would be. The stick did not work as well as a rope would have, or even a proper staff, and the process was a slow one. But after what seemed like eons of pulling, Kamari's head appeared, and she grabbed the edge of the hole. Orion grabbed her wrists and pulled her out of the hole. He set Kamari on her feet, but as he released her, she started to collapse. "Whoa," Orion said, reaching out to support her again. "Are you okay?" She nodded shakily as he helped her sit down. It was a few moments before she could do anything but stare at the spot where the forest floor gave way, her would-be prison, and shiver. Eventually, she looked up from her trance and stared at him as if she was not quite sure she believed he was actually there. "I was so afraid." She stopped, lifted her chin slightly, and started again. "I didn't think you would come." Now it was Orion's turn to stare. "Why wouldn't I come?" he asked in bewilderment. Because I... Kamari's voice started to tremble. She took a deep breath and regained control of herself. "Because I've been so rotten to you, and also because I knew my trail would be very difficult to follow." Uncertain as to how he was supposed to respond, and afraid that she would give way to hysteria at any moment, Orion said, "I'm a pretty good tracker." He hesitated, then continued. "And you haven't really been that bad. I mean, I shouldn't have risen to the occasion so often. You are the princess, after all, and I've been treating you as if I was expecting you to be something you're not." A flush of anger rose in Kamari's cheeks. "What is that supposed to mean?" "I didn't mean that in a bad way," Orion quickly explained. "I mean that you can't help the fact that you've been waited on your entire life, and you expect everyone to do so. You've been entitled to it, so I could hardly expect you to quit treating everyone like servants." "For your information," Kamari stopped. "Who am I?" she thought to herself. "I am not the person that he thinks I am I? And if I am, then what can I do to change?" She hesitated, and then continued in a different vein instead of defending herself. "I had started to gather the firewood when I fell down the hole, so I suppose I will have to start over again. Only this time I'll watch out for holes in the ground." She smiled at him winningly. Yeah." Orion stared at the creature before him in confusion. "Who is this girl?" he asked himself, as he said, "How about we gather that firewood on our way back towards the camp? Darby probably thinks we've run out on her by now." Kamari laughed. "Probably." As they walked back to their campsite, Orion gathered up the courage to say, "Can I ask you a question?" "Sure," Kamari said. "Just where did you learn how to use a sword?" And I think we will pause there and take a little break, and then we'll do the scene with Brant here in a minute. Do you have some stuff you want to sum up or inform us about?
Well, there are a couple of things. First off, I want to thank you for a fantastic reading. And I do have a question of Janelle related to the reading. What was it like, Janelle, the first time you heard your characters speaking through Mr. Fife?
It was really fun. It is really fun. Benjamin just does such a great job, and I love that he does all the voices. I'm really thankful that he didn't shy away from this project, since it's kind of massive. And I told him, I was like, the first book has 67 speaking characters, and he was like, all right, let's do it. So, but no, I love it. I love it. It kind of makes the story come back to life for me. It's been a while since I wrote them. So
yeah, it's a big project.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, I just want to quickly share the screen here, so just bear with me for a moment. Let's see, right here. You will probably recognize that beautiful young lady there as our Janelle itself, but I did want to mention the coloring page that Ben's mentioned. This is one that his daughter used to say, teenage daughter. She's still a teenager, but just barely. Janelle, Eleanor just turned, what was it, 18?
Yep.
Yeah, 18. So she's doing these coloring pages, and she's doing a whole series of them for the Zach Bates Eco Adventure, and we'll get into that later. But this will be available, and if you're interested in it, this is not just for the kids to color. During all this stressful time, coloring can be very therapeutic. So I would encourage you to give it a try for the adults as well. And certainly can be a fun project for, the kids and parents to do together. And we will be sending this out as part of the follow-up email. So if you're not on our email list and you want to be, purely optional, but if you would like to be, then simply put your email address in the chat, and we will collect that and add you to the follow-up email itself. Any questions about that? I've got something going on weird on my computer here. I'm trying to get out of the sharing here.
I just wanted to say, Eleanor, that coloring page is awesome, and I love it. Thank you for doing that. You very much captured Kamari's angst at the situation.
Yeah, it's very good. Yeah, she is in the process of creating the Zach Bates Eco Adventure coloring book that will be out sometime later this year. So I enjoy every time she loads a new one that she does as well. I think we can go ahead if you're ready in for the last section, and then we will open it up at the end for additional questions itself.
And to save Janelle from summing it up, I'll sum it up really quick here. So we're fast forwarding. It's a couple of chapters, I believe, here. And at this point, they've, I don't want to say much without spoilers or whatever. There was a tragedy basically in Peak Shadow that led Brant to leave. And so they're still looking for Brant, and Brant is now actually heading to the palace to go and find King Arnaud, but he doesn't know that somebody has been sent to find him. So, and it's in the middle of the night basically, and he's coming through the mountains of dusk, and this is where we're at. Okay. Brant silently kicked himself as he realized that he had somehow given himself away and had woken the man sitting by the campfire. Quietly now, and with more care, Brant moved towards the campfire. When he was about 20 feet away, he stopped and surveyed the area. The man standing guard was now pacing back and forth, probably trying to keep himself awake. Behind him, under an outcropping of rock, there were the forms of 3 other people who appeared to be sleeping. He wondered if he should try to talk with them or if he should just get rid of them. Weighing his options, he decided that it was less risky to try talking first. His attackers were ahead of him, had to be ahead of him. Even if these people were bandits or enemies, it was very likely they did not know what he looked like. Besides, if he attacked first and they were not the ones he was looking for, innocent blood might be shed, and that was not what Brant wanted. His decision made, Brant stood and strode into the circle of light offered by the campfire. "Hello there, friend," he said, loudly enough to startle the guard, but quietly enough that his greeting could not be mistaken for a threat. O'Rayan jumped and grasped the hilt of his sword as he turned towards the person who had spoken. The voice was deep, and there was something strong and good about it. As the man strode into the light, O'Rayan studied the visitor warily. The stranger was tall, he was lean and muscular, and he wore his sword easily. He moved with deadly grace, like a falcon that could whirl and dive upon its prey with lightning speed. The man strode noisily into their camp, but O'Rayan knew he could have gotten much closer without ever being noticed. He instinctively recognized that this man was dangerous. Brant knew he was being studied, but he didn't mind. It gave him a moment to study the man before him as well. The guard was much younger than he had at first thought.
The boy was a good-looking youth with green eyes and light brown hair that was trimmed short like a squire's. He was tall, but a good 3 inches shorter than Brant. At his side, he carried a sword that Brant would have liked to look at more closely. It was obvious that the boy was experienced with the weapon, but Brant doubted he had ever used it in real combat. The youth had an unseasoned look about his face. There was something in the eyes that told Brant this young man had never had to stare death in the face. He was probably a squire, Brant decided. He was not young enough for a page. "Who goes there?" O'Rayan asked firmly. "A lone traveler, looking for some company," came Brant's casual reply. "O'Rayan, who are you talking to?" Kamari sat up, blinking. Then she noticed the stranger, and in one motion she went from lying on the ground half asleep to wide awake and standing up with her own sword drawn. Although Brant felt a wave of admiration at the girl's swift response to the situation, he knew he must quickly put both of them at ease before they got themselves hurt. "I see before me 2 knights, or at least squires. I did not realize I was in such esteemed company," he said, hoping that these 2 were, in fact, in the employ of the king. They both relaxed a bit, but the girl gripped her sword as she asked, "And who are you?" "I am merely a lone traveler journeying through Aomai, and I saw your campfire and came over hoping to join you. The road can get very lonely at times, and it has been a long time since I have conversed with other people," Brant lied. Just then the smaller of the 2 remaining sleeping figures groaned, stretched, and sat up. When he saw the face of the child, Brant jerked in recognition. The boy rubbed his eyes and looked up at the young guard. "Is it morning already?" he asked sleepily. "No, it's not morning. We were just joined by this lone traveler whose name is—" "What is your name? You have not yet told us," O'Rayan said. "Brant!" Yul yelped as he recognized the stranger. "You're alive!" Brant stiffened, all senses alert and ready to flee or fight to the death. Whichever course of action was demanded. But as if he had not already been surprised enough for one night, the girl smiled warmly and relaxed with a relieved sigh. Then she approached him with a friendly smile and an outstretched hand. "Brant, we've been looking for you. I'm so glad we found you. When we saw the village, we feared the worst." Brant retreated from the outstretched hand in distrust. "Who are you, and why were you looking for me?" The girl looked a bit taken aback. Then she smiled easily. "I'm sorry, I forgot that you weren't exactly expecting us. I'm Princess Kamari, daughter of King Arnaud and Queen Zara. These are my traveling companions, O'Rayan, who, as you already guessed, is a squire. And this is Yul, but you already know him. And that," she pointed over towards the last remaining sleeping figure, "is my maid, Darby. But you will have to meet her in the morning, because she is not very sociable tonight." Brant stared at her warily, studying her features, but she did not look much like Arnaud. But there was something about her smile that reminded him of his old friend. And that look in her eyes was the same one Arnaud had always gotten when he had to corral some stubborn farm animal. She definitely favored her mother. Brant bowed. "Princess Kamari, forgive the impertinence of my questions, but why are you seeking me?" Now the princess's face turned grave. "Because Aomai is in danger. There is an army gathering in Roalthe. We've been told that our ally, Prince Elroy, may have committed treason by joining forces with the Dark Country across the Stained Sea. That is not yet certain, but we have been preparing for the worst. My father sent my companions and myself to you in the hopes that we would find safety under your protection. When we traveled to your home and found the village destroyed, we feared that you had been killed. I am very glad to find that you survived." "I wish I could say the same for my family and my neighbors." Brant's voice was quiet. Kamari looked at him and saw for a moment how deep his hurt was. Her heart went out to him as she considered his loss. Although she had just met him, she felt as though she had known him all her life, and she was overcome by a desperate longing to ease or share some of his grief. She tried to think of the right thing to say or do to help comfort him. She had seen people hurting before because of the loss of a loved one, and had noticed how awkward and tentative their friends always seemed to be at comforting them. She hated the way that so many people could not seem to effectively reach out to those in pain. She hesitated for a brief instant, and then did the most unprincess-like thing she could think of, trying as she did so not to convey through her actions just how awkward she felt. She threw her arms around Brant and said softly, "I'm sorry." Brant was taken by complete surprise. He stood quite still and rigid for a moment, and then he tentatively hugged the girl back. When she stepped away, he shook his head and smiled. "Thank you," he said, not sure whether he ought to laugh or cry. And that's the end of our reading for today.
Very good. Very, very good. Well, I want to thank you, Ben and Janelle. I'm going to move to the gallery view here for a moment so everybody here can give him an applause, everybody who cared to, and say hi. And we're going to open it up for questions, but there was a question on the Facebook Live, and I promised them over there that I would ask questions over here. So somebody was asking where, there's two parts of this question. One is, where can I buy Janelle's books, and are any of them available as audiobooks?
Yes, one of them is available as an audiobook right now. King's Warrior, the one that we've been listening to, is available currently. The second son is done and has been sitting in Audible's queue telling me that it's headed to retail for like 12 days.
I'm really hoping that it goes live for sale sometime in the next week.
Okay.
So
I've been watching it, like it's retail.
Yeah, if it doesn't go live within a few days, I'll be calling them and saying, "Hey, what's going on?"
Yeah.
So
I'll tell you what we'll do is we'll send them a copy of tonight's reading, and maybe that'll prompt them say, people are asking for the book, maybe we should get it out there.
Right.
Very good. Very good. So again, other questions. I have a few other questions I have here, but I want to open it up also to the audience was gracious and generous enough to spend some time with us this evening. So if you have a question and you're okay about asking it, just take yourself off mute, raise your hand. We see, wait a second, we got to get over here to the view. I got to put a pin here so that we can show. Hold that up real close there. There we go. One that's almost, it looks pretty complete to me. Very good. Well done.
Nice.
So Rosie has done the first coloring page, the first of many. Now, Rosie, did you do that yourself, or did you have help from your compadres there?
I did it by myself.
Very good.
And I'm currently working on one.
Oh.
I have most of the water done.
Very good. Yes. I love the different styles of artistic license we have here. That's very good.
It looks like Gail Redden has a question.
Yes, Gail.
I really liked your book, Jeanette.
Aw, thank you. Is that Kate or Christina?
It's Kate.
Kate. Okay.
Kate. Wants to say that she really liked Echo of the Fae.
Oh, thank you.
Is that the one that you were just showing earlier?
Yep.
Show that again so I can get pin you as well so people can see it. Keep it up there for just a moment. There we go. Very great. Very great. Okay. Any other questions? I'm scanning over here. Let's see. No, we got a question here. Just tell me if you have a fixation with the constellation Orion. You know, Orion, Yorion, and Yoyan.
Royan.
I do rather love the constellation Orion, yes.
This is something we've talked about as we've been reading through the books as a family.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I've always loved the constellation Orion too. So
Yeah, it's one of the few that just about anybody can recognize up there in the stars if you're up here on the northern hemisphere. Very good. So one of my questions, one of my favorite questions I always ask writers is, what advice would you give to anyone, but particularly young people, who has this kind of aspiration or thought that maybe one day, someday, they'd like to try their hand at writing?
So my answer is kind of in a couple of parts. The first one is to write. If you don't write a lot of words, you can never improve. And I've seen a lot of authors never get started. And, I think there's I can't remember which poet it is. It's one of the Romance era poets who they've said that, you know, if he could have just stuck with something, he would have been brilliant. But he kind of drifted from one thing to another and never finished anything. So write. They say, I don't know who they are, but they say that you don't really get good until you've written 1,000,000 words. And that seems like a lot. But
just to let you know, the person who I attribute that saying to was Ray Bradbury. He said the first 1,000,000 words don't count.
That's right. Okay. I knew it was an author who was famous, but I couldn't remember which one. Yeah.
One of my favorites.
The other part of it is just to read. Read a lot. Immerse yourself in good stories. I love that quote by C.S. Lewis in Voyage of the Dawn Treader, talking about how Eustace had read only the wrong sort of books. You know, so don't read only the wrong sorts of books, but you know, read things in your genre so that you kind of know what people like, what other authors are writing, and read some stuff outside of your genre just so that you can get kind of a well-balanced view of the written word. And then the last one is probably the hardest, and that's learn how to accept criticism. If you have a super thin skin and you can't accept criticism, then you'll never get better. And that's not something that I was real good at in college or high school, but I think I've gotten better at it. And being able to take a critique and make your work better based on, you know, and not that every criticism is worthwhile. There are going to be things that people are going to say that you might just disagree with, and it's your story, but also being able to accept and know where the good criticism is to change things.
Yeah. Very good advice. Very good.
Go ahead, James.
So Janelle, it's nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too.
I'm just curious, do you market these books as young adult or middle grade? Or are they a crossover?
It's a little bit of a crossover. They're super long. And the main characters are 18-ish, and also like 40. So I've got a 10-year-old, some 18-year-olds, a 40-year-old. Some people are hundreds of years old because
they're dragons or wizards.
Dragons, and so it's not a real easy to market target audience wise, but it's kind of, I would say my most avid readers tend to be upper middle grade, lower YA, which is kind of where I've settled on marketing. Echo is much more obviously middle grade, but I've learned a lot.
It's always a hard designation to make, you know, because the publishing community wants to classify books so they know where to put them on the bookshelf.
Right.
And sometimes the challenge there is that books do cross over. Mm-hmm. And the other challenge is that from my experience, the vast majority of readers of young adult fiction are adults.
Yep.
And even middle grade fiction. Some of my favorite writers that I read all the time today are middle grade authors.
Oh yeah.
Right? You know, Gary D. Schmidt and people like him. They're fabulous writers. And so I like a good story. I don't really care about how they design it. But if you're going to market it, you have to worry about that. And that's always the challenge. I was just curious how you did it. It was just a curious question.
Yeah.
As my wife recently pointed out to me, this little set of books, you know, that has become, you know, Harry Potter was originally started as marketed as middle grade.
Mm-hmm.
I think there were a few more people than middle grade students that read that.
Yes, and what's really fascinating about that one is that it was rejected because it was too long.
Yep.
So you said you write long books, and again, that's a publishing thing. They're trying to figure out how to make it as cheap as possible so they can improve the profit margin as much as possible.
Right.
That's why she was rejected initially 14 times.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's part of why I'm an indie author. I'm just gonna write stories, and hopefully people like them. And I do have a small audience that seems to enjoy them. So that makes me happy.
Well, and you can count our family definitely among them. I've read so far the first two to my kids, and as I've been narrating, and it's been something that's a little different to be narrating the book and then reading it to my kids. It adds another element of reading it again, which I already have to do many times as an audiobook narrator. But it's something where we've enjoyed, everyone from me, I'll be 42 next month, down to my 6-year-old son, who honestly, King's Warrior was probably the first one of the books that I've read to them at night that he really tuned into and paid so much attention through.
Aww.
And we've now finished, have we finished Second Son? Yeah, okay. I'm trying to think. Yeah, okay, we finished Second Son too, and I don't know, we're reading another book now in between, but I think before it gets back to my pick, we may well finish the series. So
I love that. I love hearing that. For families to read together is really exactly how they were meant to be read. So
yeah, very good.
Okay.
Well, I want to share one last thing for you, Benny.
Yeah, just one last thing that I wanted to share is Brad and Teresa, who are on here tonight, they've joined with me in, we're doing a 30-day blog thing about kind of kids, books from when we were kids and things that got us excited about reading and some things that bring nostalgia about reading. We want to share that with as many people as possible. If you guys want to check out our Facebook pages and our websites, I have my blogs. My blog is where I'm doing it, and you can find that on my website.
Yeah, very good. And if you want to join us in that, whether you're a writer or author or not, and just respond to the questions and spread the questions around. We really want to do that to help people get back in touch with how much reading has contributed, particularly reading for the pure pleasure of it. We all do a lot of reading that's not always that pleasurable. So having some little escape reading is really what we're about. So I got something I want to share with you again as we start to wind this up. And I don't know, you might actually recognize this gentleman because he's a gentleman who was just asking some of those great questions. James goes by, his writing name is J.W. Elliott. He will be our next guest in February. The registration is not open quite yet, but when it does open in the next few days, it'll be at wbradfordswift.com/G author. That's for guest author. So he's coming up in February, and his book, Walls of Glass, also just happened to have been narrated by our own Benny Fife. So you have something really to look forward to there. As Benny said at the beginning of our Zoom call tonight, this is a little bit off the beaten track as far as fantasy and science fiction. Either James and or Benny, would you like to say anything about the book?
I guess I will, unless, well, you go ahead, James.
Sure, go ahead. I wasn't prepared to say anything. I was just going to be quiet and listen. But this is a book about, it's kind of a heavy subject. It's about racism and classism and discrimination. And it's partly autobiographical, actually, based heavily on my experience as a youth when I moved to Oklahoma with my family from Idaho and the things I experienced there. Obviously, it's fictionalized, but it is heavily autobiographical.
Very good. I'm looking forward to hearing this. I actually have it in my audio library, so we'll be starting that here very soon as well. on Audible. Also, a couple quick items here as we finish up. You are this crew of, I think we got about 20 some people on the call tonight. You are the very, very first people to see the cover reveal for Junkyard Dogs. This is book 4 of my Zach Bates Eco Adventure series, where young empath Faith Bandera becomes the newest member of the Eco Adventure team. That's due out in February, might be stretched into March, but it will also be not only available as a book, but also as an audiobook with, again, Ben Fife doing the great narration as he has done on the other first 3 books as well. And we will be doing our next to the last, I'm pretty sure it's going to be the next to the last read up on Dominion Overall. That's book 1 of the Eco Adventure series. That will be on February the 2nd, about 2 weeks on Tuesday from 7 to 8, just like this time was. And again, you can register for that, or you can send people. We really want to get the word out about these read ups. We want to, reach out to as many kids and their parents as possible. So if you know of anybody that you think would enjoy this, send them to wbradfordswift.com Readup. And again, that will be included in the follow-up email as well. And I think there's one other thing here. Let me just see. I don't remember. Yes, we are very close to giving away 1,000 of the books. These are ebooks and also audiobook editions of Dominion Overall. I think we're in the like 800 to 900 category with that. So if you're interested in that, you can go to my homepage on that, and all the information is how that you can get a copy of both the ebook and the audiobook at my website itself. And I think that is it, other than, again, one last time, thanking everybody. We so much enjoy these read-ups. And I think I can speak for Benny that we realize that they're a lot more fun when it's just not him and I by ourselves. So we want to thank you so much for coming. Thank you again, Janelle, for being our first guest author. And we would love to have you come back at some point, maybe when book 2 is out as the audiobook, or something else that you would like to have other people have a sampling of as well. And with that, I would declare that this is a complete read-up. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Thank you.
Good night.
Very interesting.
See you next time.